Okay, hello Evan. Today we are going to be discussing effective studying. So, first up, I want to ask you, what do you think is the most important thing when you are learning something?
I would say being able to fully understand what you are learning.
Okay, so making sure that it makes sense to you,
Yes.
right? Okay, great. So, here I have a little picture. This is what our picture looks like. At the bottom here, we have something called the basket of skills and knowledge. So when you're learning something, that all goes in here. So think about what you're learning in lectures, for presentations, when you're taking notes. That's all going into your basket right there. That's all right there. What we want to do is take all of the information from your basket of skills and knowledge and put it into your brain. So you'll see this is a picture. Sorry, it's a girl, but you see her brain, how it's exposed. So it's not going to her, it's going to her brain.
Yeah.
This is a process that is called encoding. So encoding is basically figuring out information, like how you're saying understanding the information. And we want to make sense of it, we want to put it in our brain, and we want to teach it to ourselves. We want to learn that information. But when we're studying, if the point of us studying is to make sure that we fully understand the information, then how do we know if we fully understand it and if we know it, or if we're just memorizing it really quickly and then it's gone out of our brains? So, what do you think is something that you should do after you've heard the information once?
Well, I think the most obvious stuff is to write it down and make sure you study it.
Okay, great. So I totally agree. Writing it down, taking notes is a super important step in learning and studying. But when we go back to study it, a method that doesn't really help us is rewriting those notes, because you've already done that once. You don't want to bore your brain with, okay, I'm just doing the same thing. You're not actively going to be thinking about what you're doing. You're just going to be copying it. So the next step in this study cycle is called retrieval. So when we are practicing retrieval, we are looking inside of our brains and thinking, what from the basket of skills and knowledge do I remember? What do I know? We want to practice testing ourselves and assessing our knowledge. And once we assess our knowledge, then we can figure out just showing that there. If we do know it, great. Then in that session that we're studying, we don't have to study it anymore. So I'm just going to write, if you know it, study at a later time. Because let's say you're studying for a test that you have on Friday, and you start studying on a Monday. On Monday, you think, okay, I have this concept, and this concept down. Do you think that you should not study it anymore? Or do you think maybe on Wednesday or on Thursday you should go back to it, just make sure you remember you have it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So then, that's if you remember a topic. But if you are finding that you're struggling to remember a topic, then there's an arrow back to the basket of skills and knowledge. What do you think that signifies? What do you think that means? What should you do?
Relearning the lesson.
Yes. An important part of that, relearning the lesson. We don't want to, like I said earlier, teach ourselves in the same way that we were taught before, because obviously that way didn't work for us to begin with. So we want to encode in a new way. So finding a new way to learn the information, to teach ourselves the information so that it sticks in our brain. So if you learned by writing down notes and by listening to a teacher lecture, then maybe what you should do to encode in a new way is make flashcards for yourself and write down all the details that you remember, or details from a book, or maybe make a Quizlet that can make a study guide for yourself, or find a friend in a class and talk about what it is that you're learning. But This is called a study cycle. I'm gonna write the study cycle. And it's called a study cycle because if you'll notice, there isn't an end. You just keep learning new information and making sure that you have retained the information, and you just keep going through processes of finding new ways to keep that information in your brain and make it make sense so that you remember it and that you know it so well that when you're taking a test, you're like, oh, I got this. I'm not even worried. Even though I'm a little stressed out for the test, I know the material so well because I've learned it in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the study cycle.